Adam Driver just signed on to play Mister Sinister. Let that settle for a second. The actor who made Kylo Ren one of the most psychologically complex villains in blockbuster history. The actor who disappeared into Marriage Story in a way that genuinely made people forget he was acting. The actor who has spent years turning down superhero roles specifically because nothing felt worthy of what he wanted to bring to the table. He found the role, and the role is Nathaniel Essex, Victorian-era geneticist, obsessive manipulator of the Grey and Summers bloodlines, one of the most quietly terrifying villains the X-Men have ever produced. And Marvel is putting him front and center in the very first film of the mutant era. The MCU X-Men reboot is May 5th, 2028. The full cast is assembled, the story direction is locked, and what Marvel is building with this film is something that the previous 12 X-Men films never quite managed to do. A grounded, character-first foundation that treats mutation as a tragedy before it treats it as a superpower. Every member of this team manifested their abilities through an accidental crisis. Every one of them arrived at Xavier's school, not because they were chosen, but because they had nowhere else to go. That is the X-Men story worth telling. And the casting choices made for this lineup suggest Marvel understands exactly what that story requires. Let's go through the full picture, because there is a lot here, and all of it matters. Start with how any of this is possible in a universe that spent 15 years carefully avoiding mutants. The answer is Secret Wars, and it is more elegant than a simple retcon. Following the multiversal collapse of Avengers Secret Wars, reality does not simply restore itself. It is rebuilt, guided by the cosmic rewrites of God Loki holding the timelines together, Franklin Richards, whose reality warping power operates at a level beyond any Infinity Stone, and Wanda Maximoff, whose entire arc has been about making what should not exist anyway. The reality that emerges from that rebuilding is a reality in which mutants, the Avengers, and the Fantastic Four have always coexisted. The anti-mutant prejudice is already baked in because it has apparently been building for decades in a world that suddenly remembers having mutants in it. And the legal walls between Fox and Marvel that kept these characters separated for 20 years have been demolished by cosmic fiction rather than corporate negotiation. The multiverse did the merger. What this means for Phase 7 is significant. The X-Men are not arriving as visitors from another dimension. They are not variants or multiversal anomalies. They are native to this Earth, and the world is afraid of them the way Westeros is afraid of dragons, not as theoretical threats, but as things that have been present and suppressed, and are now becoming impossible to keep quiet about. Sadie Sink as Jean Grey carries the most narrative continuity of anyone in this ensemble because Jean already appeared in Brand New Day. The audience has met her. They watched her in Crisis. They watched her board a bus to Westchester. They understood where she was going. The X-Men film does not need to reintroduce Jean from scratch. It picks up with someone the audience has feelings about and pushes her further into the story she was always heading toward. The Phoenix Force is not happening yet. Marvel is being deliberate about that. The cosmic entity that defines Jean's most famous arc is being held in reserve for future phases, which is exactly the right call after watching the Fox films rush to that conclusion twice without building the foundation that would make it land. This Jean is carrying the burden of telepathic power in a world that just watched a telepathic crisis in New York and responded with government surveillance and inhibitor collar technology. Her specific power in this specific political climate is the worst possible combination for someone trying to live a normal life. Kit Connor as Scott Summers is the casting that generated the most conversation, and the details behind it reward the attention. The intensive screen testing process that produced this decision was looking for something specific. A Scott Summers who carries authority, not because he was born confident, but because the situation demanded he become it. Connor's work in Heartstopper demonstrated his ability to play vulnerability with complete commitment. His work in Warfare demonstrated his ability to operate under pressure without losing internal specificity. The combination of those two qualities is exactly what a young Cyclops requires. Not a leader by nature, a leader by necessity. The weight of keeping a traumatized team together expressed through someone who is also figuring out how to carry that weight. His backstory leaves room for enormous future development. Havoc and Vulcan as brothers, Corsair and the Starjammers as cosmic family, a mythology that extends well beyond what the first film will be able to touch. Inde Navarrette as Rogue is the restoration of a character that previous adaptations significantly diluted. Anna Paquin's version, as much as audiences connected to her, was fundamentally shaped by the needs of a story centered on other people. This version of Rogue is described as aiming for close alignment with classic source material, the emotional vulnerability sitting alongside raw physical power, the specific tragedy of someone whose touch drains the life and memory out of whatever she makes contact with, the isolation that comes from being unable to make physical connection with another person without consequence. Her power-stealing ability is being positioned as a long-term character journey rather than a single arc. The iconic flight and super strength that Rogue eventually gains through her absorption of Ms. Marvel's powers is a future milestone rather than an immediate feature. Maya Boyd as Aurora Monroe is the storm casting that the production team developed alongside the narrative planning for Black Panther 3. That coordination is not incidental. Storm and T'Challa's relationship in the comics is one of the most significant romantic and political storylines in modern Marvel history. A Wakandan king and a mutant woman whose connection carries enormous implications for both communities. By casting Storm in the X-Men film before Black Panther 3 arrives in December 2028, Marvel is setting up the meeting of these two characters, with both properly established rather than introducing one through the other's story. Maya Boyd from The Batman and the Penguin brings the specific quality of self-possession that Storm requires. A character who was worshipped as a goddess before she understood what she was, who carries that history in how she occupies space. Christopher Abbott as Charles Xavier is the casting choice that most explicitly signals what kind of film this is going to be. Abbott is not a figurehead, he is not an all-knowing elder statesman. He is a character actor known for playing people under extreme internal pressure with extraordinary interiority. This Xavier operates more like an active mentor running a school for troubled young people than like the established authority of previous versions. He is figuring out the institution at the same time his students are figuring out themselves. That parallel vulnerability between teacher and student is what makes the best X-Men stories work when they work. And casting Abbott is the production committing to that dynamic, rather than shortcutting past it. Charles Melton in active negotiations for Hank McCoy brings a specific quality to Beast that the role has always needed and rarely gotten, the combination of physical presence and genuine intellectual warmth. Beast is the character who bridges Xavier's idealism and the harsh biological reality of mutation. He is the team's scientist, strategist, and emotional anchor in the moments when Xavier cannot be all three simultaneously. Melton's dramatic range, demonstrated across his recent work, suggests the Beast who is funny without being a comic relief figure, and tender without being a passive presence. Samara Weaving as Emma Frost is the casting that changes the internal chemistry of the ensemble in ways that will take multiple films to fully appreciate. She is older than the core student cast. She is entering through the Hellfire Club rather than through Xavier's school. She is positioned as a morally ambiguous third party rather than a straightforward villain or a straightforward ally. The Massachusetts Academy storyline, her history as a teacher, the Hellions she trained, the tragedy of the upstart's attack on her students, becomes available as backstory rather than active plotline, which gives this version of Emma Frost depth without requiring the audience to learn it all in the first film. Weaving's specific screen quality, the aristocratic authority that sits alongside genuine menace, is exactly what the White Queen requires. And then Adam Driver as Nathaniel Essex, Mister Sinister, the villain who has been circling the X-Men film universe for years without landing. Essex Corp teased in the Apocalypse post-credits, John Hamm cast, and then lost to corporate merger chaos during New Mutants. Driver reportedly turning down multiple superhero roles until something worthy of what he wanted to bring appeared. This is the role, a Victorian-era scientist who became obsessed with genetic mutation to the point of altering himself, who has been manipulating the Grey and Summers bloodlines across generations for reasons that take the full run of his comic history to fully appreciate. The film will not put him immediately in his full monstrous form. He enters behind corporate disguise, using vast resources to track and experiment on young mutants. His true shape-shifting nature revealed over the course of the story. That restraint is exactly right for an antagonist whose most disturbing quality is not what he looks like, but what he wants, and how methodically he has been pursuing it. The political infrastructure being built around this story is the element that makes it feel genuinely contemporary, rather than nostalgic. Damage control with inhibitor collar technology already in the wrong hands after Brand New Day. Val Cooper as a government figure with control over how the mutant population is monitored and managed. The Sentinel program moving from theoretical to operational. The ideological collision between government-sponsored hero teams who operate with institutional legitimacy and mutants who are persecuted by the same government that sanctions those teams. The Avengers vs. X-Men tension the comics explore so powerfully is being built from structural foundations rather than invented as a plot device when the story needs it. The Tiamat angle, the massive dormant celestial sticking out of the Indian Ocean from the Eternals post-credits as a possible location for mutant sanctuary in future sequels, is the creative decision that would most elegantly connect Phase 4's most divisive entry to Phase 7's most anticipated one. A celestial body as the geological foundation for a mutant nation. The Krakoa concept from the comics, adapted to a location that already exists in the MCU with enormous thematic resonance. Mutants building a home on a god's corpse. That is the kind of Marvel myth-making that lands when it has been properly set up, rather than simply asserted. What the 2028 X-Men film is most specifically not doing is as important as what it is doing. It is not recasting Wolverine immediately and asking audiences to emotionally replace Hugh Jackman's 30-year legacy within a single film. It is not rushing to the Dark Phoenix saga before anyone in the audience has had time to care about Jean Grey as a person rather than as a cosmic event waiting to happen. It is not replicating what the Fox films did well or poorly. It is asking a simpler and harder question. What does it feel like to be a teenager whose body just became dangerous to everyone around them? In a world that has decided the appropriate response to that is containment. And what does it look like when someone offers those teenagers something that looks like safety and turns out to be something more complicated? That is the X-Men. Every version that has ever worked has been asking some version of that question. May 5th, 2028 is when the MCU finally gets to ask it, with the full weight of 17 years of accumulated world building behind it. So here is what I need from you. Adam Driver as Sinister. Does that feel like the right villain to build the new X-Men franchise on? Or is there a different first antagonist you think would set a stronger foundation? And the Phoenix Force being held back for future phases? Does that patience feel earned to you, given how the Fox films handled it? Or do you want the story to start moving toward it sooner? Drop everything in the comments because the mutant era is 11 months out, and I want to be building toward it with you right now.